So we gathered data during an 11-week period which followed the Christmas break, and we gathered data from our paired group. So first we looked at independent learning. We wanted to see how well we felt we were supporting students through this project for their progress to the transformative learning experience of level 6. So we looked at details from their self-assessment rubric where they'd scored themselves against kind of statements about their own, how well they felt their own metacognitive abilities were supporting their studies. And in fact, 52% of research groups thought they'd improved their metacognitive abilities, and only 21% of control groups felt the same. This shows a huge increase, but there are a lot of variables to consider here. And the other things that we did is we asked students from all groups an exit question about how prepared they were for level 6 study. And here there was little variation between answers from control and research groups, so the data here appears to be slightly at odds with each other. Now, there were a lot of variables here, and in particular we did ask students whether they'd felt their initial self-assessment was accurate, and in many cases they didn't feel it was accurate. That's because they felt they'd overscored. You know, they'd come in from level 4 with a very sort of slightly inflated idea of their own abilities, and then they'd had to sort of readjust that. Now that actually gives more credence to the thought that they've improved it, because you know we didn't actually take the students who felt they had a big disparity, who we didn't take their data into account. We just sort of trashed that data. So it shows even more that perhaps even if those who weren't declaring it felt that they had perhaps overmarked themselves on their initial self-assessment, still felt they'd improved their metacognitive abilities. So that's quite interesting. So the data does suggest that informal learning techniques positively affect a student's knowledge of their own process, which could support their progress to the transformative learning experience of level 6, that kind of independent, self-directed learning. But these factors must be taken into account. And also students weren't asked questions under control conditions. This was due to timetabling constraints, and with the exit questionnaire they were told that their answers would affect the planning of provision, so that might well have affected some of their responses here. So independent learning seems to show that the small research groups had quite a substantial effect, but there are an awful lot of variables, so it's very difficult to be sure about this. So we also looked at summative outcome. Learner engagement we looked at as well, but there's a separate audio file on that page. Summative outcome is very interesting. We looked again with our paired research and control groups. We'd already sort of said we couldn't use one of the pairings of groups because one of the groups had had poor attendance due to lots of external curriculum area activity. And you can see that with the research group 1, which is the chart I've got here, by and large these follow the same pattern, and that's the same for research group 2, very similar results, apart from this area. And these are the lower achieving learners, and you've got to remember here that 40% is a pass grade. So there is quite a substantial improvement there between research and control groups. And in fact what happens up here is that there's a slight improvement there as well between research and control groups, so that's quite positive. What seemed to happen with both groups is that when it came to students working at the lower end of the grade boundaries, more students from research groups in both cases passed the assignments. And so you can see that in the table here as well. So, and the chart. So in group 1, 84% of control group students passed, 88% of research group students passed. Control group 2, 75% of students passed, 82 from the research group. So that's a small, but I feel it is quite a significant difference. And there are variables here. There are fewer variables in group 1, where 3 groups, because 3 groups out of the 4 had the same lead lecturer, but one group had a different lead lecturer. But the groups with the same lead lecturer were group 1.